and His Word, then if they have to do that, in other words, the commandment in Matthew 10 verse 8, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Well, we've read in Matthew 17 that they couldn't cast out the lunatic devil. That only goes out by fasting and prayer. So they need to go through that 3.5 years of nourishment by God, not be in Jerusalem, not bow down to the image of the beast, and allow the fasting and prayer to bring them to a place of faith where they totally reject the Babylonian religious system and they believe God and His Word over what the Antichrist and apostate Israel is saying. So they need that in order to have the faith, in order to cast out all the devils. They could cast out some, but not all, until they get to that point. So what I'm saying is that even though Revelation 12 language seems to say that they're put off into this wilderness and they just stay there for 3.5 years, God protects them, nothing goes wrong with them, they're completely fine, they're not killed, that God protects them, and then once it's over, then God brings them into the kingdom. That's what Revelation 12 seems to say. But when you read Matthew 10 and you see they're commissioned to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, they're told to go to all the cities of Israel, and they keep doing that, and they don't even go to all of them until the Son of Man be come. And they also have to learn through fasting and prayer to trust in God's Word. Then you also see that the brother delivering up the brother to death, the father, the child. The point is, from Matthew 10's language, we know that there are at least some of the believing remnant who isn't in some wilderness protected by God physically, because they're actually going from city to city in Israel preaching the gospel of the kingdom and doing the signs and wonders associated with that, so that the lost sheep of Israel may be saved. So it may seem like I'm just going around in circles, but really what the point I'm making is that at least spiritually speaking, the woman flees into the wilderness and God feeds her there for the 3.5 years. Physically speaking, there's got to be at least some part of Israel, some of the believing remnant, who is, even if the woman goes into a physical wilderness and no one can touch her and she's completely safe, won't be killed, won't be persecuted or anything like that. There's at least some of the believing remnant in Israel who is not in that location, because you've got them doing the signs, going to the cities of Israel, people being delivered up and killed for not taking the mark or worshiping the image of the beast. And because of that, I think that it's only referring to them spiritually. That spiritually, He tries to hit them with this. Spiritually, God seals them and they will make it into the kingdom. Spiritually, the dragon tries to destroy them with the flood, and God protects those 144,000 so that they do enter the kingdom. Because another part of that Matthew 24, and I don't know if I read it or not, was the fact that in verse 22, He says, except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. So it seems to indicate that these 144,000 who are sealed are not in a place where, it's not like they're in heaven where Satan can't touch them and nothing bad, they can't sin, they can't do, it appears that they are, even though they flee to the mountains, they end up, God probably, He nourishes there with the Word and gets them to believe that rather than the Babylonian religious system. And then they're probably sent out. And God says, okay, now you've learned this lesson, now you can go to this city over here, because now you've had faith in my word over the Babylonian religious system, and now you can do the signs of the kingdom there. You can heal the sick, you can cast out devils, because they have this specific problem that you've already learned by faith to trust God in. So then they go over there and they do those signs, they preach the gospel, but then they're in danger of being captured and being killed by the Antichrist. And the indication here, except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. What that tells me is that if God extended the tribulation period, gave them, say, another 5 years, because he says, you're not going to go to all the cities in Israel before the Son of Man comes. And you think, well, why not? Why wouldn't he go to all Israel? So give him another 5 years. And the answer is, well, if I gave him another 5 years, the deception by Satan in that time is so great that if I continued and allowed that to happen, that even those 144,000 would end up not believing and would end up outside of the kingdom. And so for their sake, the days are shortened. Yes, sir?
Okay, how far did the 12 get with carrying out that Great Commission?
How far did they get? Not that far. I mean, they didn't even get out of Jerusalem.
That's what
I mean, he said in Acts 1,
verse 1,
start in Jerusalem, go to Judea, go to these other cities outside in Jerusalem, then go to Samaria, then the uttermost parts of the earth.
Acts 1,
And
yeah. 8:1.
Well, Acts 1:8, but then in Acts 8:1 you have the persecution that takes place, and all of them leave except for the apostles. They stay in Jerusalem because they recognize we haven't done the commission in Jerusalem, and so they stay there. Yeah, so they never even got out of Jerusalem before that happened. Yeah.
Well, some of them have to be kind of thinned out. I mean, in my mind, there's no way they can send God do what he wants, but 144,000 is active. Ain't you going to take your daughter, your son, your mama, your sister that may not be a believer, but you're going to take them because they're blood kin? Or the 144,000 just going to say, we're 144,000, let's go?
They're going,
ain't you going to have a lot of unbelievers in there with them?
I don't believe so. That those unbelievers will make the choice. And it's sort of like back in Genesis 19 with Sodom and Gomorrah. You had Lot and his wife, Lot's 2 daughters, and Lot's 2 daughters were married to 2 men. You know, so it's Lot's son-in-laws. So you had a family of 6 there. Lot, his wife, 2 daughters, and their 2 husbands. Lot warns them and says, hey, God says he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. We need to get out of here. The son-in-law says they just acted like Lot was lost his mind. He's crazy. And so when you notice when they leave, it's Lot and his wife and then the 2 daughters. The son-in-laws stay there. And then you have the wife, she looks back, turns into a pillar of salt. So then you're left with just Lot and the 2 daughters. Maybe they are unbelievers, the daughters. It doesn't really tell you. It tells you Lot is righteous. Over in Peter it says that Lot is righteous. It doesn't really address the daughters. Based on their actions, getting their father drunk and being pregnant by them, they don't seem too righteous. Then again, Lot doesn't seem righteous either, because basically God has to drag him out kicking and screaming, and he won't obey, but yet we're told he's righteous. I think that the daughters of Lot had believed him enough to leave their husbands and their family behind. And so I think that they were believers. And so my opinion is that this really separates, like it says, the brother shall condemn the brother to death, the child shall get the father, and and vice versa. I think this is really where you find out who the believers are and who aren't. There's that parable in Matthew 13 that talks about separating the wheat from the chaff. And he says, why don't we go ahead and says, okay, let's harvest the wheat out. And so we don't. And he says, no, let them both grow together. And then when it's time for the harvest, then we can see which is the wheat and which is the chaff. The chaff's going to be burned, the wheat's going into the barn. So I think that's the process here, is that you've got the first 3.5 years of the tribulation period is the time where people make their decision. If they're going to have faith in what the 2 witnesses are saying, what God's remnant is saying, or if they're going to believe the Antichrist. And then, once you get halfway through, then they've got the decision to make. Either if they're siding with the Antichrist, or if they don't trust God, they're going to say, hey, we're going to go take this mark because we're not going to be able to survive. We're going to starve to death. So we're going to make that decision. And then other people are going to say, Well, if I do that, I'm going to the lake of fire because I believe God. So I think at that point, people have to make their decision. And I don't think I think it's such a big decision. You know, it's not like, well, do I buy a red car or a blue car? You know, if that's the case, somebody who really wants a red car is going to say, and the other one wants the blue, they're going to say, yeah, go ahead and buy the blue car. You know, it's not a big deal. But this is life or death situation. So I think that people, even though they've got family together, the family, like Lot, a believer is going to go to all of his family and say, hey, let's get out of here. We're going to be killed if we don't take the mark, and if we take the mark, we're going to hell. So let's get out of here now. And then everybody's going to make their own individual decision, and they'll say, you're crazy. I'm not going with you. I got to eat. I got to survive. You're going to go out there and starve to death. So I'm going to stay here. Or they're going to say, yeah, I believe God and His Word. I'm going to go with you. I mean, it's possible that some unbelievers go as well, and then they're separated out during that 3.5-year period. But I think that since it's a life or death situation, it's every man for himself. Everybody's going to make their decision. Just like, you know, if you have a bunch of people in a burning building, you know, everybody makes it's not a family thing, sort of. It's just everybody makes their decision. Am I going to try to get out of the burning building, or I'm going to wait for the firefighter to come and rescue me? You know, that type of thing. So and again, that's my opinion. It doesn't really address if unbelievers are there with them, but that's what I think.
Look in Romans chapter 2, man, if you will.
Okay, Romans 2.
Verse 28, 29.
Yeah, Romans 2:28. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men but of God.
That's
Yeah.
a real Jew.
Right.
Not just because he's a descendant of Abraham.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I had that on.
Both of them together.
Yeah, I had that on my outline. I was going to go to John chapter 8 because Jesus makes that distinction with the Pharisees.
Yeah.
The Pharisees are there and they say, we be seed of Abraham. And then you have Jesus saying, if Abraham was your father, you would do the works of Abraham. So even though the Pharisees are physical Jews, Jesus says, you're children of the devil.
Yeah.
Because in your heart, like this verse says, in your heart.
That would be verse 28.
Yeah,
Children of the devil.
they're outwardly, but because the circumcision is in the heart and not in the flesh, then they are not part of that. Yeah. So, did anything I say make sense, or you want me to go over it?
No.
Just say don't go over it.
No, but I don't want to keep interrupting. I'm like, you're going to have young, what I'm getting at. If you got a 3-year-old, you're going to take it with you.
Right.
6-year-old, whatever, I don't know how the Jews think you become. No, because that young one will be a believer.
Well,
At the time.
isn't there somewhere that says the 144 going to be
I think it's
virgins?
going to be more.
I think he's thinking that the 144 is going to have family.
Right.
Is that right? Are you thinking the
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to
144?
get. How does he distinguish this 144,000? They all get up from the whole place of Israel and go there without taking any family member, anything. I mean, you know,
Well,
a dog, cat, something.
okay.
Well,
Okay,
when they left Egypt, they carried everything.
The virgin verse you're talking about is Revelation 14:4.
14.
So,
And
The 144,000 are supposedly supposed to be virgins.
right.
So they wouldn't have, unless they're mom and dad, they wouldn't have any children.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So then there wouldn't be any family to worry about bringing.
well, again, you got to look at and ask the question: is that a physical thing?
I don't
Okay.
believe it.
And I agree with you, EC. I don't think it is. I think it's spiritual virgins. Old Testament, a lot of language in your Old Testament, and you read, if you go through the reading of the Bible, you're going to see this come up a lot. Israel is referred to as the virgin daughter of Zion. She's also called a harlot, and with her many whoredoms, she's gone astray. That's all talking about spiritually, is that she goes away from her God and worships other gods, so she's a whore, she's a harlot. God has Hosea marry a prostitute, saying this is what Israel is like. But then God says he's going to marry a virgin. It's through the cleansing of the blood on the cross that God takes Israel's sin, cleanses it, and now they are as if they never sinned, and they are virgins, pure and whole spiritually. You see that in the Old Testament. I think that's what the virgin references in Revelation 14, is that it doesn't mean, because it says 14:4, these are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Well, if you take that to a physical thing, then that means they're all men. No women are part of the 144,000, because it says they're not defiled with women. So if they're not defiled with women, they must be all men. It must have been a virgin, and getting married is not a sin. You can marry someone and in the sanctity of marriage.
You got to be right on that, because it said, hope that you be pregnant.
Yeah. I was just about to get that. Matthew 24, it says, woe to those who are giving suck during those days, because now you got to carry your child. So I think you're absolutely right that there are families that are going to be fleeing. And you've got the woman who has a 6-month-old baby who is breastfeeding, and it's a little more difficult to run in that condition, because now you got to carry a baby, which is heavy, and then you got to stop and feed it when Christ take care of that, and you're trying to run, keep them from chopping your head off. So I believe this is just a reference to spiritual virgins. There will be families. I agree that you've got children. If you've got 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, a child, young child, the child really isn't in a position, they're not past what the Baptists like to call the age of accountability. They're not at the point where they have the ability to make that decision as to who they're going to follow. So if their parents, if you're 3 years old and your parents flee, they're taking you with them. And if you've got a 3-year-old and you're an unbeliever and you decide to take the mark of the beast, the child's going right along with them. The child doesn't really have a say-so in that. I'm really talking about the adults. I think that, if you've got a family, husband, wife, young kids, the kids are going wherever the parents are going. And they're not, a 3-year-old isn't sitting there thinking, okay, do I believe that the Antichrist is the Christ? Or do I believe God and His Word? They're not at that point. So, I think the children, they just go along with whatever the parents do. But I'm talking about adults, though. If you've got a 20-year-old son, he's going to make the decision. He's going to say, I'm going to stay here and get fed, or I'm going to go with you and trust in God to feed me.
But God knows everything, and He's got everything planned out, so does He already know who the 144,000 is?
Sure. Yeah.
So He'd already be able to number them one by one.
Yeah, spiritually, it's not... Yeah, another thing is, in Revelation 7, when He does the sealing, it says, 12,000 of the tribe of Judah sealed 12,000, tribe of Reuben 12,000, tribe of Gad 12,000, tribe of Asher 12,000. If you go to Israel now and somebody says they're a Jew, you ask them what tribe they're from, they don't know. They've lost the ability to figure out which tribe they're from. You don't have the 12 tribes as far as man is concerned, but God knows. God knows who is descended from Asher, who's descended from Reuben, who's descended from Simeon. So what I think we have here is you've got those, like E.C. says, you've got Jews. They hear the two witnesses. They either believe the gospel or they don't. And then if they believe it, then they are part of that remnant, and God knows that there are who has believed. And so He seals 12,000 from each tribe, even though man has no clue. And so that's another reason why I think it's a spiritual sealing too.
Are there any significance to, what is 12 times 12?
144.
Are there any significance to that?
Well, 12 represents governmental perfection.
Yeah.
And so you've got the Old Testament says that that God, when He made man, He divided out according to the number of the children of Israel. So He divided the earth into 12 sections. Right. One tribe is going to be in each section. Probably heavenly places are divided similarly, 12 sections. So there's a significance to the 12. 12 times 12, usually when you have a number and it's multiplied by the same number, there's more behind that, more of a completeness behind it.
I just ain't never found a good answer to that.
I think it's probably, my guess is it has to do with 12 is that governmental perfection number, so 12 times 12,000 is more of a completion or perfection of the government. Sort of like 7 is the number of spiritual completion, and you have 70 times 7 is the 490 years. 490 years before it makes an end of sin. So I think it has to do with just a perfection or a completion of that, I would guess. But yeah, I don't know specifically. So did you have any more questions, or did that?
You run out of time to answer anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand most of it now, I think.
I think it's very difficult, and I'm not saying that I have all the right answers because it's so difficult. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time studying this, considering all the scriptures to come up with my thoughts on this. So I think, I wouldn't tell you it if I thought it was wrong. I believe what I'm saying is correct. But, if I get to heaven and find out I'm wrong, I'm not going to be surprised and say, well, I learned something new when I got there, So,
You're going to deny saying it, don't you?
Yeah, I'll be like Sarah. I didn't laugh. And he said, oh, yes, he did. So I think mainly, although there's basically to summarize, even though there's physical involved, it's mainly a spiritual thing. So I guess we're out of time, so we'll pick up here next time.